Fantasy Philosophers is brought to you by fantasy-info.com.
Oddly enough, Eli Manning's offseason in some ways was kind of like Tony Romo's, although his maybe wasn't as hyped in the sense that remember that Plaxico Burress, obviously, the whole gun incident, he was gone from the team and his whole situation. We know what happened there. So the big question for him, just like Romo, who lost Terrell Owens, is who's going to step up and be the big player or the players in the offense that are going to make this passing game thrive again, because they didn't have that household name. In the first round, they went out and they got Hakeem Nicks from North Carolina. He set a lot of records out in Carolina as a receiver and has a lot of talent, big, physical, fast, can make plays. He was starting out very slow over the summer. He wasn't getting into he had some health injuries and things like that. It's very typical for young, especially receivers, to have these kind of things happen. So it looked like, well, maybe, Nicks will be, maybe hopefully a factor in the second half of the season or something, but we just don't know. Somebody's got to step up. Steve Smith, not the Steve Smith from Carolina, but there's another Steve Smith that fantasy owners all for sure know now. The Steve Smith from USC. Smith was coming into his third season last year, that magical season for receivers in fantasy where they go out and they end up somehow. There's a lot of these guys that just break out. Whatever it is about that season, there's guys that maybe their first, second year, they didn't do that much for the team. And Smith, he did have highlights. He did have some success for the playoff run that they had when they won their Super Bowl here and there. But other than that, he really hadn't done anything for the fantasy radar. Last year, he definitely broke out. He had himself a great season. He definitely became Manning's number one possession type guy. Mario Manningham was another name. He was in his second year last year, another guy from Michigan. He came out and he was very hot to start the season. He showed his immaturity issues, as time went on through the season, and he did lose the starting job to Hakeem Nicks as time went on. At the same time with Manningham, it's easy to see that this kid, as long as he keeps his head on straight and everything, he should definitely be a factor, and he could be a very dangerous player in that offense in the slot, or you could move him around and do a lot of things with actually him and Steve Smith. You can move them around and do a lot of things with both of them. With those two, they were really helpful. Eli Manning and Hakeem Nicks, hey, he came out, and what did we find out? That it seemed like he was just a guy who could make touchdowns and make those big plays that they needed, and we were hoping that he could deliver for that team. He started to show that he could do that. He took over a starting role again, as we mentioned earlier. So now, all of a sudden, Eli's got, three really nice wide receivers to throw the ball to instead of just having the one that he had with Plexico Burress where he would lock onto him all the time. Now he's got three guys out there that he can spread the ball around to. Steve Smith is definitely still the number one guy to have for fantasy out there, but Hakeem Nicks is on his way. And, like I say, Manningham, he's still a good young receiver. Because of this, and because I still have concerns with, Brandon Jacobs, I don't know that he's going to bounce back this season. If I'm not mistaken, I think they have a very hard schedule against the run this year. And I don't know. I'm not feeling it. We'll see how Brandon does. Even if he does run good, I still think Eli's going to have a pretty darn good season. I think, last year he got barely over 4,000 yards. I think he gets to that point again this year as his receivers are only getting better, and he seems to just continue to mature. His touchdown totals, we're getting around 30 now, and I expect that to continue. I'd say right now he's probably the 8th best fantasy quarterback that we have on our boards, and that's because, he's really only put one real strong fantasy season together. About 3-4 years back, he did have a season where he went over 3,700 yards and 24 touchdowns, but that was a long time ago. It did display that he does have talent, obviously. He was a top-round pick, and he's on a good team. I do believe he'll do it, but we've only seen him do it once, and before we saw that season, they were a very run-heavy, defensive-minded team. Maybe they can return to that again. I don't think they can this year, and so Eli Manning should put up another good season. If you get him, hey, you're going to get him probably to start him, and I think that's, he's definitely worth starting on your team. He can have some really big days, and he can help your fantasy team out. I think when you're getting him with maybe if he is around the 8th quarterback that's being selected in drafts, you're not necessarily looking for him to be your juggernaut player on your team, but just be a good, steady, productive player at quarterback, and every once in a while put together a really nice day. He should be able to do that for you, and that will bring you success through the season.
For more fantasy football information, go to fantasy-info.com and sign up for our free e-newsletter. Good luck in your 2010 Fantasy Football League. As an added bonus, the Fantasy Info guys will include their 5 secret tips for success in fantasy